My boyfriend said I wasn't pretty enough to marry in front of his friends. I smiled, packed my bags, and what happened next left him begging. Subscribe to the channel and like the video to see more stories like this. My boyfriend said in front of his friends that if I were younger and prettier like his coworker, he would marry me. And that's why he's not sure if he wants to marry me. Even after 5 years of dating, the words hung in the air like poison. We were sitting at Marcus's favorite steakhouse, celebrating his promotion to senior project manager. Around the table sat his closest friends from college, Jake, Trevor, and Ben, all successful men in their early 30s who loved nothing more than expensive whiskey and comparing their lives like trading cards. I had ordered the salmon, dressed in the navy dress Marcus had complimented that morning. My hair was styled the way he liked it, swept to one side. I had even worn the pearl earrings his mother gave me last Christmas, the ones she said made me look sophisticated. I thought I looked nice. I thought this dinner would be special. Then Trevor, already 3 drinks in, leaned back in his chair with that smug grin he always wore when he thought he was being clever. So Marcus, when are you finally going to put a ring on Emma's finger? 5 years is a long time, man. The table went quiet. I felt my cheeks flush, not from embarrassment at the question, but from the sudden tension in Marcus's jaw. He took a long sip of his bourbon, and I watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed. The silence stretched too long. Jake jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. Come on, Trev. Maybe they're just enjoying the ride. Not everyone needs to rush into marriage, right, Marcus? Marcus set down his glass with a deliberate click. His eyes were fixed on the amber liquid, not on me. You know, it's complicated. My stomach tightened. What did he just say? Trevor wouldn't let it go. Complicated how? She's great. She's here. She clearly loves you. What's the holdup? That's when Marcus looked up, and his eyes swept across the table to land on Ben. You remember Sarah from my office? The new marketing coordinator? Ben nodded, a knowing smile already forming. Oh yeah, the one who just transferred from the Seattle branch? She's sharp. Marcus's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Exactly. She's 24, ambitious, always smiling. Yesterday, she stayed late to help me prep for the board meeting, and I'm telling you guys, she has this energy, this spark. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Was he really doing this? He continued, oblivious or uncaring of the shift in my breathing. If Emma were younger and prettier like Sarah, if she had that same drive and enthusiasm, then yeah, I'd marry her in a heartbeat. But honestly, I'm not sure anymore. 5 years is a long time, and people change. Or maybe they just show you who they really are. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not the words themselves, which were cruel enough, but the casual way he said them. Like he was discussing the weather. Like I wasn't sitting right there. My hand frozen in midair, my entire body going numb. Trevor's eyes went wide. Dude, that's rough. Jake at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. He glanced at me, then quickly away, focusing intently on cutting his steak into smaller and smaller pieces. Ben, however, laughed. A real, genuine laugh that made my blood run cold. I mean, yeah, Sarah is pretty hot. Can't blame you for having standards, Marcus. A man's gotta know his worth. Marcus nodded like Ben had just validated something profound. Exactly. Thank you. Finally, someone who gets it. I slowly lowered my fork to my plate. The restaurant around us continued its normal hum. Conversations at other tables, the clink of silverware, the soft jazz playing overhead. But at our table, in this moment, everything had crystallized into perfect, terrible clarity. I could feel them all looking at me now, waiting for tears, for anger, for some dramatic scene they could later recount to their girlfriends or wives with exasperated sighs about emotional women. Instead, I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a forced smile, but a real, genuine smile that came from somewhere deep inside me, where all the pieces were suddenly, finally, falling into place. Marcus frowned, confused by my reaction. Emma, are you okay? I picked up my wine glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. The Pinot Noir he had ordered for me because he always ordered for me was actually quite good. I'd never really paid attention before. I'm perfect, I said, my voice steady and clear. In fact, I've never been better. Trevor leaned forward, his drunk curiosity getting the better of him. You're not upset? Why would I be upset? I asked, setting down my glass with the same deliberate care Marcus had used earlier. He just did me the biggest favor of my life. Now Marcus looked genuinely worried. Emma, I think you're in shock. Maybe we should go. No, I said, standing up smoothly and reaching for my purse. You should stay. Enjoy your celebration. You earned it, right? Senior project manager. That's impressive. All those long nights at the office with Sarah must have really paid off. The way his face went pale told me everything I needed to know. Everything I had suspected but convinced myself I was imagining. All those late meetings, the sudden interest in his appearance, the distance that had been growing between us like a slow freeze. I pulled out my wallet and placed 2 crisp $100 bills on the table. That should cover my portion of dinner and drinks. I wouldn't want you to think I'm taking advantage of your generosity, Marcus. After all, a man needs to know his worth. Emma, wait. He started to stand, but I held up my hand. Don't, I said quietly. Just don't. You've said enough. I turned and walked through that restaurant with my head high, my steps measured and calm. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. But inside, something had broken. Not my heart. That would come later. What broke in that moment was the last shred of doubt. The last whisper of, maybe I'm overreacting. The last shred of the woman who would have made excuses for him. By the time I reached my car in the parking lot, my phone was already buzzing with texts from Marcus. Emma, please come back. We need to talk. You're being ridiculous. I didn't mean it like that. You're overreacting. I turned off my phone without reading the rest. The drive back to our apartment, the one we'd shared for 3 years, the one where I'd made a home while he'd apparently been shopping for something better, took 22 minutes. I used every single one of them to plan. When I walked through the door, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need them. I knew every corner of this place. I had decorated it, cleaned it, made it warm. My fingerprints were on every surface, but my name wasn't wasn't on the lease, only his. Another thing I'd overlooked in the name of love and partnership. I pulled out my largest suitcase from the hall closet and methodically began to pack. Not everything, just what was truly mine. Clothes, toiletries, the jewelry my grandmother left me, my laptop, important documents, photographs of my family. I left behind anything he'd given me. The pearl earrings went on the bathroom counter. The navy dress, the one he'd complimented that morning, went in the trash. It took me less than an hour to erase myself from his life. I was loading the last box into my car when I heard his BMW pull into the parking lot. The engine cut off and I heard his door slam. His footsteps were quick, almost running. "Emma, what are you doing?" His voice cracked on my name. "You can't just leave." I closed my trunk and turned to face him. His hair was disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it, his tie loosened, his eyes wild with something that might have been panic, but looked a lot like anger at losing control. "Actually," I said calmly, "I can, and I am." "Over one stupid comment? You're going to throw away 5 years over words?" He stepped closer, and I could smell the bourbon on his breath. The scent that used to mean cozy nights together now just smelled like betrayal. "No, Marcus," I said, my voice never wavering. "I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that when you decided Sarah was your future and I was your past. I'm just acknowledging reality." "I didn't mean it," he said, and now real panic was seeping into his voice. "I was drunk. I was showing off for the guys. You know how they are." I held up my hand, the same gesture I'd used in the restaurant. "The guys didn't humiliate me in front of your friends, Marcus. You did. The guys didn't compare me to another woman and find me lacking. You did. The guys didn't spend 5 years accepting my love while apparently keeping one foot out the door. You did." He reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Emma, please. I love you." The laugh that came out of me was harsh and unfamiliar. "No, you don't. And honestly, I don't think you ever did. I think I was convenient. I think I was comfortable. I think I fit into your life plan until someone shinier came along." "That's not true," he insisted, but his eyes couldn't quite meet mine. "It doesn't matter anymore," I said, opening my car door. "Whether it's true or not, whether you meant it or not, you can't unsay those words, and I can't unhear them. So this is where we end. Where will you go?" he asked, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. "Somewhere I'm appreciated," I said. "Somewhere my worth isn't determined by my age or how I compare to a 24-year-old. Somewhere I'm someone's first choice, not their backup plan." I got in my car and started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see him standing there, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides, his mouth opening and closing like he was trying to find words that didn't exist. As I drove away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to see him getting smaller and smaller behind me. I already knew exactly how small he really was. My phone, which I'd turned back on, was exploding with messages, not just from Marcus, but now from Jake, and surprisingly, from a number I didn't recognize. The unknown number's message was simple. "This is Ben's girlfriend, Ashley. I just heard what happened from Ben. I'm so sorry. If you need anything, please call me. That asshole doesn't deserve you." I smiled grimly. Even Ben's girlfriend saw it. But it was the message from my best friend Diane that made me pull over into a coffee shop parking lot. She'd sent it 15 minutes ago. I just got off the phone with Trevor's wife, Michelle. She told me what Marcus said at dinner. "I'm at your sister's house with Wine and Murder podcasts. Get here now." The tears I'd been holding back finally came, but they weren't the tears Marcus would have expected. They weren't tears of heartbreak or loss. They were tears of relief, of release, of 5 years of doubt and second-guessing finally being validated. I typed back, "On my way. And Diane, thank you for believing me." Her response was immediate, always. "And Emma, that karma thing you don't believe in, it's about to become very real for Marcus fucking Patterson." I didn't know what she meant, but as I started my car and headed toward my sister's house, toward safety and support and people who actually valued me, I realized I didn't care. Marcus had made his choice in that restaurant. He'd chosen humiliation over loyalty, cruelty over kindness, a pretty young face over 5 years of partnership. What he didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that I had made a choice too, and my choice was going to change everything. But that revelation would have to wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I just needed my sister, my best friend, wine, and the comfort of knowing that walking away was the bravest thing I'd ever done. What Marcus would discover in the coming days would teach him a lesson about worth, about choices, and about what happens when you discard something valuable because you're too blind to see what you have. But that's a story that starts tomorrow, when the real consequences of his words begin to unfold, and when he realizes that the woman he thought wasn't pretty enough or young enough to marry was actually the best thing that ever happened to him, and by then, it would be far too late. I woke up the next morning on my sister Rachel's couch with a pounding headache and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and I could hear her in the kitchen making coffee. The smell of it, strong and bitter, pulled me fully awake. My phone sat on the coffee table where I'd left it last night after finally turning off the notifications. 37 missed calls from Marcus, 62 text messages, 3 voicemails. I didn't need to listen to them to know what they said. I'd heard it all before in past arguments, the cycle of anger, then bargaining, then promises, then subtle blame. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't going back. Rachel appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee, her expression a mixture of sisterly concern and barely suppressed rage. She'd been furious when I told her and Diane everything last night. She'd wanted to drive to Marcus's apartment and key his car. Diane had to physically stop her. "How are you feeling?" Rachel asked, handing me a mug and settling into the armchair across from me. "Like I've been hit by a truck," I admitted, taking a grateful sip, "but also like I can finally breathe." "Good," she said firmly, "because we need to talk about practical matters. Your lease situation, your belongings still at his place, and most importantly, your plan." I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus. "I haven't really thought beyond getting out." "Well, lucky for you I have," Rachel said, pulling out her phone. I talked to Mom this morning. Don't worry, I didn't tell her the specifics, just that you and Marcus broke up. She's disappointed but supportive. She said you can stay with her and Dad if you need to, but I already told her you're staying here until you figure things out. Rachel, I can't impose. You're not imposing. She cut me off. You're my sister. This is what family does. Besides, I have that extra bedroom since Colin moved out, and honestly, I could use the company. Colin was her ex-fiance who'd broken up with her 6 months ago. She'd been putting on a brave face, but I knew she was still healing. Maybe we could heal together. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I'd do without you. Probably something stupid like take him back, she said with a small smile, which is exactly why I'm not letting you out of my sight for at least a week. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Marcus. I rejected it automatically. You're going to have to talk to him eventually, Rachel said, at least to coordinate getting the rest of your stuff. I know, I sighed, but not today. Today I need to figure out my next steps. Actually, Diane called this morning too, Rachel said, her expression shifting to something I couldn't quite read. She said she has information you need to hear. She's coming over at 10. I glanced at the clock on the wall. That was in 20 minutes. What kind of information? She wouldn't say over the phone, Rachel replied. But Emma, she sounded excited, like really excited. Before I could process what that meant, there was a sharp knock at the door. Rachel jumped up to answer it, and moments later, Diane swept in like a force of nature. She was dressed in her work clothes, a crisp blazer and slacks, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. Okay, she announced, setting her bag on the coffee table and pulling out her laptop. You're going to want to sit down for this. I'm already sitting, I pointed out. Then sit harder, because this is going to blow your mind, Diane said, opening her laptop and turning it to face me. Do you remember how I told you last night that Karma was coming for Marcus? Vaguely, I admitted. I was pretty out of it by that point. Well, it's here and it's beautiful, Diane said, practically vibrating with energy. Emma, what do you know about Marcus's company's new client? The question caught me off guard. Not much. He mentioned they landed a big account a few months ago. Some tech startup that needed project management consulting. Why? Because that tech startup is owned by my company, Diane said. We acquired it 3 weeks ago. And guess who's in charge of vetting all contracted consultants and project managers? My heart started beating faster. You? Me? She confirmed, her smile widening. And guess whose contract comes up for review next week as part of our standard due diligence process? I felt my breath catch. Marcus. Ding, 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 Diane said. And here's where it gets even better. Part of that review process includes interviews with current and former romantic partners to assess potential conflicts of interest and character evaluation. It's standard for positions that handle sensitive client information. My mind was reeling. Wait, so you're saying I'm saying that I have a legitimate professional reason to interview you about Marcus's character and conduct, Diane said. And whatever you tell me, good or bad, goes into his permanent file and directly influences whether his contract gets renewed. Rachel let out a low whistle. That's not just karma. That's karma with a legal pad and a ballpoint pen. But I couldn't take advantage of that, I said, even as part of me thrilled at the possibility. That would be revenge, wouldn't it? No, Diane said firmly. Revenge would be making something up. This is you telling the truth about his character in a professional context where that truth is relevant and requested. There's a difference. She pulled out a folder from her bag and handed it to me. I've already started the file. These are the standard questions we ask. You don't have to answer anything you're not comfortable with, but Emma, the questions are things like, does this person demonstrate professional integrity? Have you observed behaviors that might indicate poor judgment or ethical concerns? Would you trust this person with confidential information? I opened the folder, my hands shaking slightly. The questions were indeed standard, professional, and entirely relevant. And after last night, I knew exactly how I'd answer them. There's more, Diane continued. During my preliminary review, I noticed some irregularities in his expense reports. Nothing illegal, but definitely questionable. Dinners charged to the client account that seem excessive. Multiple instances of overnight hotel stays within the city when he supposedly worked late at the office. My stomach turned. With Sarah? I can't confirm that, Diane said carefully. But the dates match up with several times in the last 3 months when you told me he said he was working late on the account. Rachel stood up abruptly. I'm getting more coffee, and possibly something stronger. Anyone else? Make it a double, I muttered, staring at the expense reports Diane had printed out. December 15th, the night Marcus told me he had to work through the night to meet a deadline. December 22nd, when he said there was a crisis that required his immediate attention. January 7th, January 14th, January 28th. The pattern was unmistakable. Emma, Diane said gently, sitting down next to me. I know this hurts. I know it's a betrayal on top of a betrayal, but you have power here. Real power. Not to destroy him, but to ensure that his actions have appropriate consequences. What happens if his contract isn't renewed? I asked. He loses the account, which is about 40% of his firm's current revenue, Diane explained. His boss would not be happy. It wouldn't end his career, but it would definitely damage it. And more importantly, it would mean he can't work with Sarah anymore, since she's the marketing coordinator on that account. The irony was almost too perfect. The woman he'd compared me to, found me lacking against, would become professionally off limits to him. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a number I didn't recognize at first. Then I realized it was Marcus calling from his office phone. Emma, please answer. I need to talk to you. This is important. I showed the text to Diane and Rachel, who had returned with 3 mugs of coffee heavily doctored with Bailey's. Don't respond, Diane advised. Let him sweat. But he said it's important, I said, hating that part of me still worried about him. More important than humiliating you in front of his friends? Rachel asked pointedly. More important than comparing you to his coworker? More important than making you feel worthless after 5 years? She was right. I silenced my phone phone and set it face down on the table. So what do I do now? I asked, looking between my sister and my best friend, the two women who had never let me down, who had never made me feel less than. Now, Diane said, pulling out a digital recorder from her bag, we conduct the interview. Professionally, thoroughly, and honestly. And whatever happens after that is just the natural consequence of Marcus's own choices. I took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, let's do it. For the next hour, Diane asked questions and I answered them. Honestly, painfully, thoroughly. I told her about the times Marcus had lied about working late, about the gradual emotional distance that had grown between us, about the way he'd started criticizing my appearance, my clothes, my career, always with a joke or a smile that made it hard to call out, about his habit of flirting with younger women at parties while I stood right there, about the financial situation I'd only recently discovered, where he'd been spending money on expensive dinners and gifts that I never saw while telling me we needed to be careful with expenses. By the time we finished, I felt raw, but also strangely lighter. Speaking these truths out loud, having them documented and validated, made them real in a way they'd never been before. This is solid, Diane said, reviewing her notes. Emma, I want you to know that even without this interview, the expense report irregularities alone would warrant a serious review. You're not destroying him. He did this to himself. When does the review happen? I asked. Official meeting is scheduled for next Thursday, she said. His boss and my team will be there. Marcus doesn't know yet that I'm the one conducting it. The timing was almost poetic. Exactly 1 week from the dinner that had changed everything. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was an email notification. I glanced at it and felt my blood run cold. What? Rachel asked, seeing my expression. It's from Marcus, I said slowly, opening the email. He sent me an eviction notice, claiming that since the apartment is in his name only, he needs me to remove any remaining belongings within 48 hours or he'll consider them abandoned property. Diane grabbed my phone and read the email, her expression darkening. This is such bullshit. He's doing this because you won't talk to him. He's trying to force contact. Two can play that game, Rachel said, pulling out her own phone. My friend Tyler is a lawyer. He owes me a favor. Let me call him. While Rachel stepped into the other room to make the call, I sat there trying to process everything. In less than 24 hours, my entire life had been turned upside down. And yet, somehow, I didn't feel lost. I felt focused. Angry? Yes. Hurt? Definitely. But also determined. Okay, Rachel said, coming back into the room. Tyler says that email is legally meaningless. Since you've been living there for 3 years, you're considered a tenant with rights even without a formal lease. He can't kick you out with 48 hours notice. You have at least 30 days, and he'd have to go through formal eviction proceedings. So the email is just him being a vindictive asshole, Diane concluded. Pretty much, Rachel confirmed. Tyler also said that if Marcus tries to dispose of or damage any of your property, that's illegal and you can sue. He suggested you respond with a formal letter establishing your tenant rights and stating that you'll remove your belongings on your own timeline. I don't want to drag this out though, I said. I don't want any reason to stay connected to him. You don't have to drag it out, Rachel assured me, but you also don't have to let him bully you. Respond on your terms, not his. She was right. Everything until now had been on Marcus's terms. His apartment, his timeline, his rules, his humiliation. It was time to take back control. I need to see him, I said suddenly. Not at the apartment, somewhere public. Somewhere I can say what I need to say and then walk away for good. Are you sure that's a good idea? Diane asked carefully. No, I admitted, but I think it's necessary. For me, not for him. I need him to see that I'm not broken, that I'm not going to beg or cry or make it easy for him to paint me as the crazy ex-girlfriend. Rachel and Diane exchanged glances, then nodded in unison. Okay, Rachel said, but we're coming with you. We'll stay in the background, but we're not letting you face him alone. And I'm bringing my phone to record, Diane added, just in case he says anything that might be relevant to my professional review. I smiled despite everything. I don't deserve you to. Yes, you do, Diane said firmly. And that's exactly what Marcus never understood. You deserve people who see your worth, not people who make you question it. I pulled out my phone and began typing a response to Marcus's email. Not an emotional plea or an angry rant, but something simple and direct. Marcus, I will collect my remaining belongings from the apartment this Friday at 3 p.m. I will bring 2 witnesses. You are not required to be present. After this, we will have no further contact unless absolutely necessary for legal purposes. Do not call, text, or email me again. Emma. I showed it to Rachel and Diane, who both approved. Perfect, Diane said. Professional, final, and completely in control. I hit send before I could second guess myself. The response came less than 5 minutes later. Emma, please, we need to talk in person. Just you and me. No witnesses, no drama. I can explain everything. I love you. I made a mistake. Please give me a chance to make this right. I read it out loud to Rachel and Diane, who both made disgusted noises. Don't respond, Rachel advised. You said what you needed to say. Let him sit with it. But he'll just keep texting, I protested. Then block him, Diane said simply. You've established your boundaries. You've told him your plan. Anything else is just him trying to manipulate you into giving him what he wants. She was right. I blocked Marcus's number, his email, his social media profiles, every avenue of contact cut off. It should have felt scary, that finality. Instead, it felt like freedom. For the rest of that day, I focused on practical matters. Rachel helped me make a list of everything still at Marcus's apartment. Diane helped me draft a formal demand letter through Tyler, establishing my legal rights and timeline. I called my bank and removed Marcus from my emergency contact list. I changed my passwords on every account. I updated my address with my employer. Each small step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd given away over 5 years, piece by piece, until I barely recognized who I'd become. That night, as I lay in Rachel's guest bed, I finally let myself cry. Not for Marcus, but for the version of myself who had believed his love was worth changing for, who had made herself smaller, quieter, more agreeable, thinking that if she just tried hard enough, she'd finally be enough. But I was done being small. I was done being quiet. And I was definitely done trying to be enough for someone who would never appreciate me. Tomorrow, I'd start building a life that was entirely my own. And if Marcus thought last night's humiliation was the end of his problems, he was about to learn exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The interview with Diane was just the beginning. By the time I was done, Marcus Patterson would understand exactly what he'd thrown away, and he'd spend a very long time regretting it. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth for March. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing clothes that made me feel powerful. Black jeans, a fitted blazer, boots with a solid heel. Rachel had insisted on doing my makeup, giving me bold lipstick and perfectly lined eyes. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She looked strong, determined, unbreakable. Diane arrived at Rachel's apartment at 2:30, giving us plenty of time to drive to Marcus's place. She had her phone ready, recording app tested and prepared. Rachel had brought boxes and garbage bags, ready to pack efficiently and get out as quickly as possible. "You ready?" Rachel asked as we climbed into her SUV. I nodded, but my hands were shaking slightly. I hadn't seen Marcus since I'd walked out of that restaurant 4 days ago. 4 days that felt like a lifetime. The drive to the apartment complex where I'd lived for 3 years felt surreal. Every street corner held memories. The coffee shop where Marcus and I used to have Sunday breakfast. The park where we'd walked on summer evenings. The grocery store where I'd shopped every week, carefully buying his favorite foods and mine. How much of myself had I erased to fit into his life? When we pulled into the parking lot, I immediately spotted Marcus's BMW in his assigned spot. My stomach clenched. I'd told him he didn't need to be there. Of course he hadn't listened. "He's here," I said quietly. "Do you want to leave?" Diane asked immediately. "We can come back another day with a police escort if necessary." "No," I said firmly. "I'm done running. I'm done letting him control the situation." We parked and got out. I could feel eyes watching us from Marcus's third-floor window. The apartment that had once felt like home now looked like a prison I'd finally escaped. As we approached the building entrance, my phone buzzed. I'd unblocked Marcus's number that morning, just for today, just in case. His text was predictable. "I see you brought an audience. I thought we could handle this like adults." I didn't respond. Adults don't humiliate their partners in public, I thought. Adults don't send threatening eviction notices. Adults don't cheat with their coworkers. We rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened on the third floor, Marcus was standing in the hallway outside his apartment door. He looked terrible. His hair was unwashed, his clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. Part of me felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but recognition of his pain. Then I remembered his words in that restaurant, and the feeling evaporated. "Emma," he said, ignoring Rachel and Diane completely. "Please, can we talk? Just for 5 minutes?" "No," I said simply, walking past him into the apartment. I left the door open behind me, knowing Rachel and Diane would follow. The apartment looked exactly as I'd left it, except messier. Takeout containers on the coffee table, empty beer bottles lined up on the kitchen counter. The bedroom door was closed. "Emma," Marcus said, following me inside, "you can't just shut me out like this. 5 years means something. What we had means something." "What we had," I said, turning to face him, "was based on a lie. You spent 5 years pretending I was enough while apparently keeping your options open." "That's not true," he protested. "I made one stupid comment when I was drunk. One comment that revealed how you really feel." I corrected him. "You don't accidentally compare your girlfriend to another woman and say you'd marry her if she were prettier and younger. That's not a slip of the tongue, Marcus. That's the truth coming out." "I was showing off for the guys," he said desperately. "You know how Trevor is? He was pushing my buttons." "And your response was to throw me under the bus?" I asked. "Your response was to humiliate me? Because that's what you do when someone pushes your buttons. You sacrifice the person who loves you to look good in front of your friends." He flinched like I'd hit him. "I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did," I said quietly. "And even if you didn't, you can't take it back." "I heard it, Marcus. I heard every word. And more importantly, I finally saw you clearly for the first time in 5 years. Emma, please," he begged. "I love you. I want to marry you. I'll prove it right now." He started to reach into his pocket, and my heart seized with horror. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't you dare." But he did. He pulled out a small velvet box, the kind that holds a ring. My stomach turned. "I bought this 3 months ago," he said, opening it to reveal a diamond ring that probably cost more than I made in a month. "I was planning to propose on your birthday next month. This whole thing is just terrible timing." Rachel made a disgusted noise from where she stood by the door. Diane's phone was discreetly pointed toward us, capturing every word. "Terrible timing?" I repeated, my voice deadly calm. "You bought a ring 3 months ago, but spent last week having dinners with Sarah at expensive hotels? You were planning to propose, but told your friends you weren't sure you wanted to marry me? Do you even hear yourself? Those dinners were work," he insisted. "You're blowing that out of proportion." I pulled out my own phone and opened the screenshots Diane had sent me yesterday. Copies of his expense reports, professionally obtained through proper channels as part of her review process. "This one," I said, showing him his own submitted expense report, "says dinner for 2 at the Modern, $347. You told me you worked late at the office that night. I made you a plate of leftovers that you never ate." "That was a client dinner," he said weakly. "Your client is a tech startup run by a 35-year-old man named David Chen," I said. "He's married with 2 kids and lives in Boston. He wasn't at this dinner, Marcus, but I'm betting Sarah was." The color drained from his face. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know." I cut him off. "What matters is that you've been lying to me for months, maybe longer, and I was so busy trying to be enough for you that I didn't see it." it. Nothing happened with Sarah, he said desperately. I swear to God, Emma, nothing physical happened. I don't believe you, I said simply. But even if that's true, emotional betrayal is still betrayal. You've been building something with her while letting what we had fall apart. That's not fair, he protested. You're the one who pulled away first. You stopped making an effort. You stopped caring about your appearance. There it was. The shift from apologetic to accusatory. The blame that I'd been waiting for. I stopped making an effort, I repeated slowly. I worked 40 hours a week at my job, then came home and cooked dinner, cleaned the apartment, did your laundry, planned our social calendar, and still tried to be interesting and attractive for you. And when you started criticizing my clothes, I bought new ones. When you said you liked my hair longer, I grew it out. When you said I should lose a few pounds, I joined a gym. I made myself smaller and smaller trying to fit your changing standards, and it was never enough, because the problem was never me, Marcus. It was you. He stood there, the ring box still open in his hand, looking lost. That's not how I remember it. Of course it isn't, I said, because you've rewritten history to make yourself the victim. Poor Marcus, stuck with a girlfriend who let herself go. Poor Marcus, forced to look elsewhere for appreciation. Poor Marcus, who definitely deserves better than the woman who spent 5 years loving him unconditionally. I love you, he said again, but it sounded hollow now. Rehearsed. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut off contact with Sarah. Whatever you want. What I want, I said clearly, is for you to step aside so I can get my things and leave. What I want is to never hear you compare me to another woman again. What I want is to build a life with someone who actually appreciates me, not someone who settles for me while keeping one eye on the door. So that's it? He asked, anger creeping into his voice now that he realized begging wasn't working. 5 years and you're just done? No, Marcus, I said. You were done. You've been done for a while, probably since the moment Sarah walked into your office with her youth and her spark and her enthusiasm. I'm just finally accepting it. You're making a mistake, he said, snapping the ring box closed. You'll regret this, maybe, I acknowledged, but I'll regret staying even more. I turned away from him and walked into the bedroom, our bedroom, for 3 years. The bed we'd shared, the closet where my clothes had hung next to his, the dresser where I'd kept jewelry he'd given me for birthdays and holidays. Rachel and Diane followed me in, immediately getting to work. Rachel opened the boxes she'd brought while Diane started carefully removing my clothes from the closet. I focused on the dresser, pulling out underwear, socks, pajamas. The mundane intimacy of it all hit me. This was really happening. This was really over. In the back of my underwear drawer, I found something that made me freeze. A small notebook, one I'd forgotten about. I opened it and saw my handwriting from years ago. Dreams and goals, it said on the first page. I flipped through, seeing aspirations I'd written down when Marcus and I first moved in together. Go back to school for my master's degree, travel to Italy, start a photography side business, learn to paint, join a book club, take a cooking class. None of it had happened. Every time I'd mentioned one of these dreams, Marcus had found a reason why it wasn't practical right now. Too expensive, not enough time, maybe when we're more settled. I'd stopped mentioning them eventually. I'd stopped dreaming. I slipped the notebook into my pocket, a talisman of the woman I used to be and could be again. It took us 40 minutes to pack everything that mattered. My clothes, my books, my photographs, the few pieces of furniture I'd brought to the relationship, my kitchen things that Marcus never used, my grandmother's quilts. We worked efficiently, not speaking, while Marcus hovered in the doorway looking devastated. When we were finally done, 6 boxes and 4 bags packed into Rachel's SUV, I took one last walk through the apartment. I stopped in the living room where Marcus still stood, the ring box now sitting on the coffee table between us. You can return that, I said, gesturing to the ring, or give it to Sarah. I'm sure she'd love it. His jaw clenched. You're being cruel. No, I'm being honest. There's a difference. I went to leave, then stopped. There was one more thing I needed to say. Marcus, I turned back to face him. I hope Sarah is everything you think she is. I hope she's young enough and pretty enough and perfect enough. I hope she stays that way forever because God forbid she ages or gains weight or has a bad hair day. I hope you build a life with someone who never challenges you, never calls you out, never expects you to grow or change or be better. Because that's clearly what you want. Someone who's easy. And you're not easy? He asked bitterly. No, I said simply. I'm not easy. I'm human. I'm flawed and complicated, and I have days where I don't wear makeup or where I'm tired or grumpy or not the prettiest woman in the room, but I'm also loyal and honest, and I would have stood by you through anything. And you threw that away for the possibility of something shinier. I walked out without looking back. Rachel and Diane were waiting by the elevator, having already gone down with the last load. You okay? Rachel asked when I joined them. Yeah, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. I really am. We rode down in silence. As we exited the building, I saw Marcus's face in the third-floor window, watching us leave. I didn't wave. I didn't acknowledge him. I just got in the car and let Rachel drive away. It wasn't until we were several blocks away that I realized something. The weight I'd been carrying for days, maybe years, was gone. I felt lighter, freer, like I'd shed a skin that no longer fit. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane. By the way, that recording, pure gold. Everything he said about the dinners, about Sarah, about blaming you for pulling away first. My review meeting is Monday. His boss is not going to be happy. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt bad about what was coming for Marcus professionally, but I didn't. He'd made his choices. Now he'd face the consequences. The weekend passed in a blur. Rachel and I unpacked my things in her guest room, transforming it from a generic space into something that felt like mine. Diane came over Saturday night with wine and Thai food, and we talked for hours about everything except Marcus. Sunday morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mom. Hi, honey, she said, her voice warm and concerned. Rachel told me you and Marcus split up. How are you holding up? I'm okay, I said, and meant it. Better than okay, actually. I think it needed to happen. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I won't pretend I'm not disappointed. I liked Marcus, and I was hoping to see you settled. But honey, if you weren't happy, then you made the right choice. Mom, I said carefully. Can I ask you something? Of course. Did you know that things weren't good? She sighed. I suspected. You stopped talking about him the same way. You used to light up when you mentioned him, and then over the last year or so, you just seemed tired. But I didn't want to pry. I thought maybe I was imagining it. You weren't, I admitted. I was tired. Tired of trying to be perfect. Tired of feeling like I wasn't enough. Oh, Emma, she said softly. You've always been enough. More than enough. If Marcus couldn't see that, then he's a fool. Those words, simple as they were, cracked something open in me. I started crying. Quiet tears that Rachel noticed from where she sat across the room. She came over and put her arm around me. Thanks, Mom, I managed. I needed to hear that. We talked for another hour about everything and nothing. She told me about her garden, about Dad's new hobby of woodworking, about the neighbor's cat that kept getting into their garage. Normal, everyday things that grounded me and reminded me that life was bigger than one failed relationship. When we hung up, I felt steadier. Monday was coming, and with it, the professional review that would determine Marcus's immediate future. I knew I should feel conflicted about my role in it, but every time doubt crept in, I remembered his face in that restaurant, his words, his willingness to humiliate me for approval from friends who probably wouldn't even remember the conversation in a week. No, I decided. I'd told the truth in a professional context where it was relevant and requested. What happened next was just karma finally catching up. Monday morning dawned gray and cold, the brief warmth of Friday forgotten. I went to work for the first time since the breakup, and my coworkers noticed immediately. My deskmate Jennifer took one look at me and asked if I was okay. I'm fine, I said, but she saw through it immediately. Boy problems? She guessed. Ex-boy problems, I corrected. We broke up last week. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry, she said. Was it bad? It was necessary, I replied. And honestly, I'm doing better than I thought I would, and I was. Work distracted me, gave me something to focus on besides the ticking clock that I knew was counting down to Marcus's review meeting. Diane had texted me that morning. Meeting is at 2 p.m. I'll let you know how it goes. BTW. His boss requested I send the expense reports ahead of time. This is going to be interesting. I tried not to check my phone every 5 minutes. I tried to focus on my work, on the project I was managing, on the emails that needed responses, but my mind kept drifting to an office across town where Marcus was probably sitting in a conference room, finally facing the consequences of his choices. At 2:15, my phone buzzed. Diane. It started. We'll update when it's over. But Emma, his boss looks pissed, like genuinely angry. I put my phone away and tried to work. Failed. Checked my email. Nothing urgent. Tried to work again. My leg bounced under my desk. Nervous energy with nowhere to go. Jennifer noticed. You want to take an early lunch? Get out of here for a bit? I nodded gratefully. We ended up at a sandwich shop 2 blocks away, sitting by the window, watching people hurry past in the cold. So, Jennifer said after we'd ordered, do you want to talk about it? The breakup? Not really, I admitted, but I probably should. Maybe saying it out loud to someone neutral would help. I gave her the abbreviated version. 5 years, thought it was serious. He humiliated me in front of his friends, found out he'd been emotionally cheating, left and never looked back. Jennifer's eyes got progressively wider. Emma, that's awful. I'm so sorry. The weird thing is, I'm not, I said. Sorry. I mean, I'm hurt and angry, but I'm not sorry it's over. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, she said firmly. Sounds like you dodged a bullet. Or rather, you finally stopped standing in front of one. That was exactly it. I'd been in the line of fire for so long, making myself smaller and smaller to avoid getting hit, that I'd forgotten I could just step aside. My phone buzzed again. Diane calling this time instead of texting. My heart jumped into my throat. Hold on, I told Jennifer, answering quickly. Hello? Emma, Diane said, and I could hear something in her voice. Satisfaction, maybe. Or vindication. It's done. And? I asked, my hand tight around the phone. His contract is terminated immediately, she said, effective today. His boss was furious about the expense reports, about the lack of professional judgment, about everything. And when I shared the highlights of our interview, about his character and pattern of behavior, she said that sealed it. They don't want someone like that representing their firm on major accounts. I sat back in my chair, processing. It's really over? It's really over, Diane confirmed. Emma, I want you to know that this wasn't just about you. This was about legitimate professional concerns. The expense fraud alone would have been enough. But yes, your testimony about his character helped paint a complete picture. What did he say? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Not much, Diane replied. He tried to explain away the expenses as misunderstandings. He got defensive when his boss asked about his judgment and interpersonal skills, and when it was clear they were serious about terminating his contract, he actually asked if this had anything to do with his personal life. His boss told him that his personal life only became relevant when it demonstrated a pattern of poor judgment and ethical concerns. I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly. Satisfaction, definitely. But also a tinge of sadness for what could have been if Marcus had been a different person, a better person. Thank you, I told Diane, for handling this professionally, for not making it about revenge. It was never about revenge, she said gently. It was about consequences. And Emma, those are two very different things. After I hung up, Jennifer looked at me expectantly. Well, I told her, watched her eyes go wide, then narrow with satisfaction. Good, she said firmly. People like that need to learn that actions have consequences. You didn't destroy him, Emma. He destroyed himself. You just made sure the truth came out. She was right, I knew, but it would take time for that knowledge to settle into something I felt deep in my bones rather than just understood intellectually. The rest of the day passed in in a haze. I went back to work, responded to emails, had a meeting about next quarter's projections. Normal work things that felt surreal against the backdrop of Marcus's professional life imploding across town. At 5 o'clock, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Emma, a familiar voice said. It's Jake, Marcus's friend from the restaurant. I sat up straighter. Jake, what do you want? Look, I know I have no right to call you, he said quickly, but I wanted to apologize for laughing that night at dinner, for not standing up for you. It was wrong, and I've felt terrible about it ever since. I was silent, not sure what to say. Marcus called me today, Jake continued. He's in a bad place, lost his biggest client, and he says it's because of you. Because of me? I repeated, anger blaring. Or because of his own actions? That's what I told him, Jake said. I told him that if he'd treated you better, none of this would have happened, but he's not hearing it. He's saying you sabotaged him, that you deliberately set out to ruin his career. I didn't sabotage anyone, I said firmly. I told the truth when asked professional questions by someone conducting a legitimate business review. If the truth damaged him, that's on him, not on me. I know, Jake said. That's why I'm calling, to warn you that he's spiraling. He's angry and he's looking for someone to blame. Just be careful, okay? And again, I'm really sorry about that night. You deserved better from all of us. After we hung up, I forwarded the warning to Rachel and Diane. Within minutes, both responded. Rachel, want me to come stay with you tonight, just in case? Diane, I'm documenting everything. If he contacts you or makes any threats, let me know immediately. We can get a restraining order if needed. I appreciated their concern, but part of me felt strangely calm. Marcus could rage and blame all he wanted. The truth was the truth, and no amount of anger could change what he'd done. That night, lying in Rachel's guest bed, I pulled out the old notebook I'd found in my dresser. Dreams and goals. I opened to a fresh page and started writing new ones. Finish my master's degree. Not maybe someday, but starting this fall. Travel to Italy, even if I go alone. Take that painting class at the community center. Join a book club with actual book discussions, not just wine. Start dating again, when I'm ready, but only people who add to my life instead of subtracting from it. Rebuild my friendship network, all the people I'd let slip away because Marcus didn't like them or found them boring. Learn to trust my own judgment again. Stop apologizing for taking up space. Never, ever make myself smaller for someone else's comfort. I stared at that last one for a long time. Then I underlined it twice. This was my life now. Not the life I'd planned, not the wedding I'd imagined, not the future I'd spent 5 years building toward, but mine, entirely and completely mine. And maybe that was enough. Maybe, for the first time in a long time, I was enough. 2 weeks after the professional review that ended Marcus's contract, I was starting to feel like myself again. Not the self I'd been when I was with Marcus, constantly monitoring my appearance and words, but someone older and wiser. Someone who'd learned that surviving betrayal doesn't make you bitter, it makes you selective. I was at Rachel's apartment, cooking dinner for the first time since the breakup, when my phone rang. Sarah's name flashed across the screen. Marcus's coworker, the woman he'd compared me to. My hand froze over the cutting board. Are you going to answer that? Rachel asked, looking up from her laptop where she was working on a presentation. I don't know, I admitted. What could she possibly want to say to me? Only one way to find out, Rachel said. And if she's calling to gloat or defend him, you can just hang up. I took a deep breath and answered. Hello? Emma? Sarah's voice was soft, almost tentative. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your number from the company directory. What do you want, Sarah? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. I need to talk to you, she said. About Marcus. About everything. Please, just give me 10 minutes. I glanced at Rachel, who was watching me curiously. Fine, 10 minutes. Thank you, Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. First, I need you to know that I had no idea about you, about how serious you two were. He told me you'd broken up months ago. My stomach twisted. Of course he did. He said you were still living together for financial reasons, but that it was over, Sarah continued. He said you were seeing other people. I swear to God, Emma, if I'd known the truth, I never would have gone to those dinners or spent time alone with him. But you did know, eventually, I said. You were at that restaurant. You heard what he said about me. There was a long pause. I wasn't at the restaurant. What? I said, confused. But Trevor mentioned you. Marcus talked about you like you were this perfect person he wished I was more like. I know, Sarah said quietly. I heard about it the next day. Marcus told me what happened, but he spun it differently. He said you'd made a scene because he mentioned me in conversation, that you were jealous and insecure. It wasn't until his contract got terminated and I started asking questions that I learned what really happened. She paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. Emma, I'm calling because I need you to know the truth. Marcus and I never had a physical affair, but there was something. An emotional connection, I guess you'd call it. He'd stay late, we'd talk, he'd tell me about his problems at home, with you, and I believed him because why wouldn't I? He seemed like a good guy going through a rough patch. When did you find out the truth? I asked. 2 days ago, she said. His friend Jake called me, told me everything. How Marcus humiliated you at dinner, how you weren't the controlling, jealous person Marcus painted you as, how you'd been supporting him and dealing with his criticism for years. Jake felt guilty and thought I should know what kind of man I'd been confiding in. I sat down heavily on Rachel's couch. Jake called you? He did, Sarah confirmed. And Emma, I'm so sorry. I never meant to be the other woman, even emotionally. I never meant to be part of hurting you. If I'd known the truth, I would have kept things professional from day one. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you deserve to know that you weren't wrong, Sarah said. About him, about what was happening. And because I need you to know that I've cut off all contact with Marcus. After I learned the truth, I blocked his number. I requested a transfer to a different department. I want nothing to do with him. I felt something unexpected. Not quite forgiveness, but understanding. Sarah had been manipulated too, just differently. Thank you for calling, I said finally. I appreciate you being honest. There's one more thing, Sarah said hesitantly. Marcus has been been telling people that you sabotaged his career out of revenge. He's been posting things on social media, vague things about betrayal and people showing their true colors. I just thought you should know. After we hung up, I immediately checked Marcus's social media. Rachel had told me to stay off it, but curiosity won. There, posted just hours ago, was a long rant. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. I spent 5 years with someone I thought I knew, only to discover that at the first sign of conflict, she'd destroy everything I'd built. She went to my employer, twisted the truth, and got me fired from the biggest account of my career, all because I made one comment that hurt her feelings. This is what happens when you give your heart to someone who values revenge over love. Learn from my mistake. The post had dozens of comments, mostly from people who didn't know the whole story. I'm so sorry, man. Hang in there. She sounds toxic. You're better off. Some people are just vindictive. My hands shook as I read them. Rachel looked over my shoulder and swore. He's rewriting history, making himself the victim. Of course he is, I said, feeling anger rise in my chest. That's what people like him do. They can't accept responsibility, so they create a narrative where they're the wronged party. What are you going to do? Rachel asked. I thought about it. I could respond publicly, lay out the facts, defend myself, but that would just create more drama, more back and forth, more opportunities for Marcus to play the victim. Instead, I did something else. I screenshot the post and his previous posts from the last few weeks, documenting the pattern of blame and public shaming. Then I sent them to Diane with a simple message. Is this something we should be concerned about legally? Her response came quickly. Potentially. This could be considered defamation if he's making false statements that damage your reputation. I'm forwarding to Tyler to review. In the meantime, document everything but don't engage publicly. I spent that evening documenting every post, every comment, every message. I created a timeline of events with supporting evidence. If Marcus wanted to make this a public battle, I'd be ready, but I wouldn't fire the first shot. The next morning, I received an email from Tyler, Rachel's lawyer friend. After reviewing the materials you sent, I believe we have grounds for a cease and desist letter. Mr. Patterson is making false statements that could damage your professional reputation. Would you like me to proceed? I called him immediately. What exactly would a cease and desist do? It would formally notify him that his statements are defamatory and demand he stop making them, Tyler explained. It doesn't prevent him from talking about the breakup in general terms, but it prevents him from making specific false claims about your actions. If he continues after receiving the letter, we can pursue legal action. Do it, I said. I'm done being the silent target. The letter was sent that afternoon via certified mail, requiring Marcus's signature. I knew he'd receive it the next day. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sarah's call, about Marcus's public campaign against me, about how quickly someone could try to destroy your reputation when things didn't go their way. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen to make tea. Rachel found me there, staring out the window at the dark street below. Can't sleep either? She asked. I shook my head. I keep replaying everything, wondering if I did the right thing, if I should have just stayed quiet and moved on. Rachel sat down across from me. Emma, you did what anyone would do. You told the truth when asked. The fact that the truth had consequences for him doesn't make you wrong. It makes him accountable. But his career, I started. His career suffered because of his choices, Rachel interrupted firmly. He chose to misuse company funds. He chose to lie to you about working late. He chose to pursue an emotional affair. He chose to humiliate you in public. Every single consequence he's facing is a direct result of his own actions. She was right, logically. But emotionally, I still struggled with the weight of it. The next day, I was at work when Diane called. Emma, you need to know something. Marcus filed a formal complaint against me with my company. What? I said, stepping into an empty conference room for privacy. On what grounds? He's claiming I had a conflict of interest in conducting his review, that I was biased because of my friendship with you, and that I manipulated the process to get revenge on your behalf. Can he do that? I asked, panic rising. He can file a complaint, Diane said. Whether it goes anywhere is another matter. My supervisor already reviewed the situation. I disclosed our friendship before conducting the interview. I followed proper procedure. And most importantly, the expense report issues were discovered independently of anything you told me. The complaint will be investigated, but my boss doesn't think it has merit. But still, I said, feeling guilty. I've dragged you into this mess. You didn't drag me anywhere, Diane said firmly. I made a choice to conduct that interview professionally and by the book. If Marcus wants to fight it, let him. The paper trail speaks for itself. After we hung up, I sat in that conference room for a long time, my head in my hands. This was escalating beyond a simple breakup. Marcus wasn't just hurt or angry. He was actively trying to damage everyone who'd played a role in his consequences. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. You've destroyed my career and my reputation. There will be consequences for what you've done. My heart started racing. I immediately screenshot the text and forwarded it to Tyler and Diane. Within minutes, Tyler called. That's harassment and potentially a threat, he said. Combined with the cease and desist we just sent, this is enough to file for a restraining order if you want to pursue that. I want to, I said without hesitation. I'm done being afraid. The process moved quickly. By the end of the week, I had a temporary restraining order requiring Marcus to stay at least 100 feet away from me and prohibiting any direct or indirect contact. A court hearing was scheduled for the following month to determine if it should be made permanent. Rachel insisted on coming with me to work each day that week. Diane checked in constantly. Jennifer, my desk mate, kept a watchful eye whenever I left the building. I was surrounded by people who had my back, but I also felt the weight of Marcus's anger pressing down on me. The breaking point came on Saturday. I was at Rachel's apartment trying to focus focus on an online course I'd enrolled in for my master's degree when someone started pounding on the door. Rachel and I looked at each other, fear immediate and sharp. "Is he supposed to be able to find you here?" Rachel whispered. "No," I said. "He doesn't know I'm staying with you." The pounding continued, harder now. Rachel grabbed her phone and dialed 911 while I crept to the peephole. Through it, I saw Marcus, looking wild-eyed and disheveled. He was holding something in his hand. My heart stopped. Was it a weapon? "Emma!" he shouted, his voice muffled through the door but still audible. "I know you're in there. Rachel's car is in the lot. Open the door. We need to talk." "Sir," Rachel said into her phone, giving the 911 operator her address. "My sister's ex-boyfriend is here in violation of a restraining order. He's banging on my door and refusing to leave." The operator asked if he appeared to have any weapons. Rachel relayed the question to me. "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "He's holding something, but I can't tell what it is." "Emma, please." Marcus's voice came again. "Just talk to me. You've ruined everything. My job, my reputation. Even Sarah won't talk to me anymore. You did this. You have to make it right." "I didn't do this," I shouted back before I could stop myself. "You did this to yourself. That was a mistake." Marcus started hitting the door harder, and I heard wood crack. Rachel pulled me away from the door, both of us backing into her bedroom. She locked that door too, and we huddled together, listening to Marcus rage outside. It felt like an eternity before we heard sirens, then voices, Marcus arguing with someone, more voices, and finally, blessed silence. A knock came on the apartment door, this time accompanied by an authoritative voice. "This is the police. The subject has been removed from the premises. It's safe to open the door." Rachel opened it cautiously. Two police officers stood in the hallway, one male and one female. The female officer stepped forward. "Are you Emma Harrison?" she asked me. I nodded, unable to speak. "Mr. Patterson has been arrested for violating the restraining order and for property damage," she explained. "He'll be held until his arraignment on Monday. You should document any damage to the door or your statement." We stepped out into the hallway. Marcus had indeed damaged Rachel's door. The wood around the lock splintered from his assault. The male officer was taking photos with his phone. "What was he holding?" I finally asked. "In his hand?" The female officer looked at her notes. "A manila envelope. He said it contained proof that you'd sabotaged him. When we opened it, it was full of printed social media posts and emails. Nothing relevant to his claims. So he'd come armed with his version of evidence, ready to confront me with it." The thought made me feel sick. The officers took our statements, gave us a case number, and left. Rachel and I stood in her damaged doorway, both of us shaking. "That could have been so much worse," Rachel said quietly. "I know," I replied. "He's really lost it." We spent the rest of that day giving statements to the police, calling Tyler to update him, and arranging for Rachel's door to be repaired. The building manager was sympathetic and had it fixed by that evening, but the psychological damage remained. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Marcus's face through that peephole. The rage, the desperation, the absolute refusal to accept responsibility. This was who he really was. Not the charming man I'd fallen in love with 5 years ago, but this person who would rather destroy everyone around him than look inward. Diane came over Sunday morning with bagels and information. "Marcus's arraignment is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Tyler can go with you if you want to be there." "Do I have to be?" I asked. "No," Diane said, "but it might help. Seeing him in custody, seeing the legal system work, might give you some closure." I thought about it. The idea of seeing Marcus again, even in a courtroom, made my stomach turn. But Diane was right. I needed to see this through. "I'll go," I decided, "with Tyler and Rachel, if she's willing." "Always," Rachel said immediately. Monday morning dawned cold and gray. I dressed in my most professional clothes, a charcoal suit Rachel had lent me, hoping it would make me feel armored. Tyler met us at the courthouse, briefcase in hand, looking every inch the competent attorney. The arraignment was quick and procedural. Marcus appeared via video link from the holding facility, wearing an orange jumpsuit that looked surreal against his normally polished appearance. The judge read the charges: violation of a restraining order, criminal damage to property, harassment. "How do you plead?" the judge asked. "Not guilty," Marcus said, his voice flat. "Your Honor, I was just trying to talk to my girlfriend. This whole restraining order is based on false accusations." "Ex-girlfriend," I whispered to Tyler, who nodded. The judge was not impressed. "Mr. Patterson, a restraining order is a legal document. You don't get to decide it doesn't apply because you want to talk. Bail is set at $5,000. You are ordered to have no contact, direct or indirect, with Ms. Harrison. Your next court date is March 28th. Do you understand these conditions?" Marcus looked directly at the camera, and for a moment our eyes met through the screen. The hatred in his gaze made me flinch. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. As we left the courthouse, Tyler walked me through what would happen next. "He'll probably make bail today, but with the violation on record and the arrest, your restraining order will almost certainly be made permanent at the next hearing, and depending on his behavior, he could face additional charges." "What if he comes after me again?" I asked, voicing my biggest fear. "Then he goes to jail," Tyler said simply. "Emma, I know this is scary, but the system is working. He's being held accountable. That's not nothing." He was right. After years of Marcus facing no consequences for his actions, seeing him in that orange jumpsuit, hearing a judge tell him his behavior was unacceptable, it did something to me. It validated every feeling I'd had, every decision I'd made. That afternoon, I did something I'd been putting off. I wrote a letter, not to Marcus, but to myself, to the Emma who'd sat in that restaurant 2 weeks ago, hearing the man she loved tear her down, to the Emma who'd packed her bags with shaking hands, to the Emma who'd stood in front of his door and refused to be bullied. I wrote, "You are brave, you are strong, you are enough. What he did to you was wrong, but it doesn't define you. His anger and his actions don't diminish your worth. You loved someone who didn't deserve it, and that's not your failure. It's his. Keep moving forward. Keep building your life. Keep choosing yourself. You've already survived the worst of it. Everything from here is just victory laps." I folded the letter and put it in my wallet, a reminder for the hard days I knew were still coming. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Marcus was facing consequences. Sarah knew the truth. The legal system was protecting me. My friends and family surrounded me with support, and most importantly, I was free. Free from his criticism, his control, his constant undermining of my worth. The wedding I dreamed of would never happen. The future I'd planned was gone, but in its place was something better. Uncertain, yes. Scary, definitely. But mine. Entirely, completely, irrevocably mine. And that, I was learning, was worth more than any ring could ever be. The permanent restraining order hearing arrived on a Thursday morning, exactly 1 month after Marcus had compared me to Sarah and destroyed everything we'd built. I stood outside the courtroom in my navy dress, the same one I'd worn to that fateful dinner, reclaimed now as armor instead of a costume for someone else's approval. Tyler stood beside me, reviewing his notes. Marcus's attorney will probably argue that this was an isolated incident, that he was emotional and made a mistake. We need to establish the pattern of behavior. Are you ready to testify? I nodded, my throat tight. I'd been preparing for this all week, going over everything with Tyler, making sure I had dates and facts straight. But standing here, about to face Marcus in person for the first time since that night at Rachel's door, my confidence wavered. The courtroom doors opened and people began filing in. I saw Marcus's parents first, his mother dabbing at her eyes dramatically, his father's face set in stern disapproval. They looked at me with such hatred that I actually stepped back. Then Marcus appeared with his attorney, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked thinner, more haggard, but his eyes were sharp and cold as they found mine. I forced myself not to look away. The bailiff called the court to order and Judge Martinez took her seat. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately made me feel more secure. We're here for the permanent restraining order petition filed by Emma Harrison against Marcus Patterson, she said, reviewing the file in front of her. Mr. Patterson has been charged with violating a temporary restraining order, criminal damage to property, and harassment. Mr. Patterson, how do you plead to these charges? Not guilty, Your Honor, Marcus said, his voice steady. This entire situation has been blown out of proportion. I made a mistake in going to Ms. Harrison's sister's residence, but I was desperate to speak with her after she destroyed my career and reputation through false accusations. Judge Martinez looked up sharply. Mr. Patterson, you'll have your opportunity to present your case. Right now, I'm asking about the specific charges. Did you or did you not go to an address where you knew Ms. Harrison was staying, despite having been served with a temporary restraining order? I did, but no buts, Mr. Patterson, the judge interrupted. Did you damage a door at that residence while attempting to gain entry? I was trying to talk to her, Marcus insisted. She wouldn't open the door. Answer the question, Mr. Patterson. Did you damage the door? Yes or no? Yes, he admitted reluctantly. The judge made a note and turned to me. Ms. Harrison, please approach the witness stand. I walked forward on shaking legs and was sworn in. Tyler began his questioning, starting with the easy facts. My name, my relationship history with Marcus, the timeline of our breakup. Then he asked the harder questions. Can you describe what happened on the night of February 21st at the restaurant? I took a deep breath and told the story. Every word Marcus had said, every laugh from his friends, the way I'd felt my entire world shift in that moment. I kept my voice steady, sticking to facts, but I saw the judge's expression tighten as I spoke. And after that night, what happened? Tyler asked. I moved out, I said. I collected my belongings and cut off contact with Mr. Patterson. He sent numerous texts and calls that I didn't respond to. Then he sent an email attempting to evict me illegally from his apartment. Tyler entered the email into evidence. And Ms. Harrison, you were subsequently contacted by a colleague for a professional reference check regarding Mr. Patterson's work contract, correct? Yes, I confirmed. My friend Diane works for the company that had contracted Mr. Patterson's firm. As part of their standard review process, they conduct character assessments of consultants. She interviewed me as someone who had a long-term personal relationship with Mr. Patterson. And what did you tell her in that interview? I told the truth, I said firmly, about his pattern of dishonesty, his misuse of company resources for personal matters, and my concerns about his professional judgment based on behaviors I'd observed. Marcus's attorney objected. Your Honor, this is clearly retaliation. Ms. Harrison deliberately sabotaged my client's career. Judge Martinez looked at me. Ms. Harrison, were you aware that your statements might affect Mr. Patterson's contract? I was aware it was a possibility, I admitted, but I was asked direct questions in a professional context, and I answered them honestly. I didn't volunteer information. I didn't seek out the interview. I simply told the truth when asked. The judge nodded and allowed Tyler to continue. After Mr. Patterson lost his contract, what happened? Tyler asked. He began posting about me on social media, I said, making false accusations that I'd sabotaged him out of revenge. He sent threatening text messages, and then he violated the restraining order by coming to my sister's home and trying to force his way in. Tyler entered all the evidence, screenshots of Marcus's social media posts, copies of the threatening texts, photos of Rachel's damaged door, the police report from that night. When it was Marcus's attorney's turn, he tried to paint me as vindictive and manipulative. Isn't it true that you were angry about the breakup and wanted revenge? I was hurt, I admitted, but I didn't seek revenge. I simply removed myself from the situation and answered honestly when asked professional questions. You don't think costing my client his biggest account was revenge? I think Mr. Patterson losing his account was the consequence of his own poor judgment and misuse of company resources, I said calmly. The expense reports showing personal dinners with a coworker he'd been pursuing emotionally while lying to me about working late. Those weren't my actions, they were his. The attorney tried a few more angles, but I held firm. storm. Tyler had prepared me well. And more importantly, I had the truth on my side. When Marcus took a stand, his testimony was a masterclass in deflection and blame. He claimed I'd overreacted to a harmless comment, that I'd been controlling and jealous, that I'd deliberately gone after his career because I couldn't handle the breakup. But then Tyler got his turn to cross-examine. Mr. Patterson, you stated that Ms. Harrison overreacted to a harmless comment. Can you repeat exactly what you said that night at dinner? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I don't remember exactly. You don't remember? Tyler pressed. Let me refresh your memory. You said, and I quote from the statements of 3 witnesses who were present, if Emma were younger and prettier like Sarah, I would marry her. But I'm not sure anymore. Does that sound familiar? I may have said something like that, Marcus admitted. I was drinking. And you don't consider comparing your girlfriend of 5 years unfavorably to a younger co-worker to be cruel or humiliating? It was taken out of context, Marcus insisted. What context makes that statement acceptable? Tyler asked. Marcus had no answer. Tyler continued, Mr. Patterson, you claim Ms. Harrison deliberately destroyed your career. But isn't it true that the expense report irregularities were discovered independently by your client's accounting department before Ms. Harrison was ever interviewed? I can explain those, Marcus started. That's not what I asked, Tyler interrupted. Yes or no? Were the expense irregularities discovered before Ms. Harrison's interview? Yes, Marcus admitted reluctantly. And isn't it true that several of those expenses were for dinners with your coworker Sarah, whom you told was that your relationship with Ms. Harrison was over? We were just colleagues, Marcus protested. Tyler pulled out a document. This is a statement from Sarah confirming that you led her to believe you were single and available, that you pursued an emotional relationship with her while still living with Ms. Harrison. Does this refresh your memory? Marcus's face went red. That's not fair. You're twisting everything. I'm simply presenting facts, Mr. Patterson, Tyler said. Facts that you seem unable to acknowledge. One more question. When you went to Ms. Harrison's sister's residence in violation of the restraining order, you were carrying an envelope. What was in it? Evidence, Marcus said. Proof that she'd sabotaged me. Evidence that consisted of social media screenshots and your own interpretations, correct? No actual proof of sabotage? She admitted she did the interview. Marcus exploded. She admitted she told them about the dinners. She admitted to answering questions honestly when asked by a legitimate business contact conducting a standard review. Tyler corrected. That's not sabotage, Mr. Patterson. That's you facing consequences for your own actions. Judge Martinez called for order as Marcus tried to continue arguing. When the courtroom settled, she looked at both attorneys. I've heard enough. I'll issue my ruling now. My heart pounded as she reviewed her notes. This case presents a clear pattern of behavior, the judge began. Mr. Patterson, you humiliated Ms. Harrison publicly, pursued an emotional affair while living with her, lied about your activities, and then blamed her when the natural consequences of your actions caught up with you. When she removed herself from the relationship, you harassed her, posted defamatory statements about her, sent threatening messages, and violated a court order to confront her physically. But, Your Honor, Marcus started. I'm not finished, Judge Martinez said sharply. Ms. Harrison did not sabotage your career. She answered questions honestly in a professional context. The fact that honesty about your behavior had negative consequences for you is not her fault. It's yours. You seem to believe that you're entitled to act without accountability and that anyone who holds you accountable is victimizing you. That's not how reality works, Mr. Patterson. She picked up her gavel. I'm granting the permanent restraining order. Mr. Patterson, you are to have no contact, direct or indirect, with Ms. Harrison for a period of 3 years. You are to stay at least 200 feet away from her residence, her workplace, and any location where you know she will be. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and jail time. Additionally, I'm ordering you to complete anger management counseling. Do you understand? Marcus's face had gone white. Yes, Your Honor, he whispered. Court is adjourned, the judge said, and the gavel came down with a finality that echoed through my entire body. It was over. Really, truly over. Tyler shook my hand as we left the courtroom. You did great up there. Clear, calm, factual. That made all the difference. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. For everything. Rachel was waiting in the hallway and I fell into her arms. She held me tight as I finally let myself cry. Not tears of sadness or loss, but relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. Marcus's mother approached us as we headed for the exit. You should be ashamed, she hissed at me. You've destroyed my son's life. Your son destroyed his own life, Rachel said before I could respond. And you raised him to believe he could treat people however he wanted without consequences. That's on you, not on Emma. We left before she could respond, stepping out into bright March sunshine that felt like a benediction. That night, Diane came over with champagne and Chinese takeout. We sat in Rachel's living room, the 3 of us, celebrating not just the restraining order, but everything it represented. To consequences, Diane toasted. May they always find the people who've earned them. To honesty, Rachel added, even when it's hard. To being enough, I finished. Exactly as we are. We clinked glasses and drank, and I felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Peace. Real, deep, unshakable peace. My phone buzzed with a notification. An email from the university confirming my enrollment in the graduate program starting in September. Another notification, a friend request on a photography forum I'd joined. A third, an invitation to a book club that met Tuesday evenings. My new life was taking shape piece by piece. Different than what I'd planned, but better, truer, mine. I thought about Marcus, probably at his parents' house right now, still refusing to accept responsibility, still blaming everyone else for his problems. Part of me felt sorry for him. Living like that, unable to see your own role in your unhappiness, must be exhausting. But mostly, I felt grateful. Grateful that I'd gotten out. Grateful for the people who'd supported me. Grateful even for the betrayal. betrayal, because it had forced me to choose myself for the first time in years. Will you ever date again? Diane asked as we finished the last of the champagne. Someday, I said, when I'm ready, when I've rebuilt myself enough to share with someone without losing myself again. And what kind of person would you date? Rachel asked curiously. I thought about it. Someone kind, someone who builds me up instead of tearing me down, someone who sees my worth even on days when I'm not wearing makeup or when I'm tired or grumpy, someone who chooses me consistently and clearly without making me wonder where I stand. That's not too much to ask, Diane said firmly. I know, I replied, and I'm never settling for less again. Later, lying in bed, I pulled out that old notebook, Dreams and Goals. Under the list I'd made weeks ago, I added one more item. Forgive myself for not seeing the truth sooner, for staying too long, for making myself small. I did the best I could with what I knew, and when I knew better, I did better. That's enough. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and continue building this new life. I'd go to work, take my online course, maybe check out that book club. Small steps, but all in the direction of becoming the person I was meant to be all along. The woman Marcus had tried to make me, younger and prettier and more like someone else, she was gone. Dead and buried, along with all the apologies I used to make for taking up space. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who understood that the right person wouldn't need her to change, wouldn't compare her to others, wouldn't make her feel like she was perpetually auditioning for the role of girlfriend. The right person would know, from day one, exactly how lucky they were to have her. And if that person never came along, well, I was learning that being alone was infinitely better than being with someone who made you feel lonely. Marcus had taught me that, though not in the way he'd intended. His betrayal, his cruelty, his complete inability to see me as anything more than a supporting character in his life story, it had all served a purpose. It had set me free. And freedom, I was discovering, tasted a lot like victory. 6 months after the restraining order was granted, I barely recognized my own life. I was sitting in a coffee shop near campus, working on an assignment for my graduate program, when Jennifer from work texted me. You're not going to believe who I just saw on a dating app. Want screenshots? I smiled and typed back, no thanks. Not interested in keeping tabs. And I meant it. Marcus had become a distant memory, someone I'd known in another life. The anger had faded. The hurt had healed. What remained was simply gratitude for the lessons learned and relief that I'd escaped when I did. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my new friend Claire from the book club I'd joined in April. We're meeting at Giovanni's tonight instead of the library. 7 o'clock? I confirmed and went back to my reading, but my mind wandered. Claire had introduced me to her brother David 2 months ago at a book club mixer. He was a high school history teacher, funny and kind, with eyes that crinkled when he smiled. We'd been on 3 dates so far. Nothing serious yet, but something promising. The best part? David made me feel seen. When I talked, he listened. When I shared an opinion, he considered it thoughtfully instead of dismissing it. When I wore jeans and no makeup to our second date because I'd had a long day, he told me I looked beautiful and asked what he could do to help me relax. It was revolutionary, being treated like I mattered. That evening at book club, Claire pulled me aside with an excited expression. David asked if you'd be interested in going to his school's faculty dinner next Friday as his date, official date, not just hanging out. My heart did a little flip. Tell him yes. She hugged me. I'm so happy for you. You deserve someone good. I do, I agreed. And for the first time, I truly believed it. After book club, I drove back to my new apartment. I'd moved out of Rachel's place in May, finding a small studio that was entirely mine. Every piece of furniture I'd chosen, every decoration reflected my taste, not someone else's expectations. It was modest, but perfect. As I was unlocking my door, my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, poked her head out. Emma, dear, a package came for you today. I signed for it. She handed me a medium-sized box. I thanked her and brought it inside. Curious. The return address was from my mother. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was my grandmother's china tea set, the one I'd always admired as a child, the one Gran had promised would be mine someday. Tucked in with it was a note from my mother. Emma, I found this while cleaning out the attic. Your grandmother would want you to have it now while you're building your new life. She always said these things should be used, not stored away waiting for perfect moments. I'm proud of the woman you've become. Love, Mom. I carefully unwrapped each piece, the delicate cups and saucers painted with tiny roses. I could picture Gran serving tea from this set, always insisting that everyday moments deserved beauty. She'd been right. I made myself tea in one of the cups, no longer willing to wait for special occasions. This moment, sitting in my own apartment, secure and happy and free, was special enough. My phone rang. Rachel calling from her honeymoon in Greece. She'd gotten engaged to her boyfriend Mark in June, and they'd married in a small ceremony last month. I'd been her maid of honor, wearing a dress I'd chosen and loved, standing beside her as she married someone who genuinely cherished her. How's Athens? I asked when I answered. Incredible, she gushed. Emma, you have to come visit. Stay with us next summer. Mark's already planning all the historical sites we could show you. I'd love that, I said, meaning it. The old Emma would have hesitated, worried about imposing or being a third wheel. The new Emma knew that people who loved you wanted you around. How are things with David? Rachel asked. Last we talked, you'd had your third date. Fourth date is Friday, I admitted. His school's faculty dinner. I'm nervous. Don't be, Rachel said. Emma, you've faced down much scarier things than a dinner party. And David's one of the good ones. I can tell. She was right. I'd survived betrayal, public humiliation, legal battles, and come out stronger. A faculty dinner was nothing. After we hung up, I checked my email. One new message from Diane with the subject line, thought you should know. My stomach clenched briefly, old instincts kicking in, but when I opened it, I found myself oddly unmoved by the contents. Diane had forwarded me a LinkedIn post from Marcus. He'd changed jobs, moving to a smaller firm outside outside the city. His post was carefully worded professional growth and new opportunities, but Diane's message filled in the context. Apparently, his reputation in the industry took a hit after losing that major contract. Word got around about the expense report issues. He's starting over at a much less prestigious company, basically back where he was 5 years ago. Sarah, by the way, got promoted. She's now heading up the entire marketing division. Karma is beautiful. I read it twice, waiting for the satisfaction or vindication I thought ideal. Instead, I just felt nothing. Marcus's life, his success or failure, simply didn't matter to me anymore. I hope he learned something. I typed back to Diane. But honestly, I've stopped caring about his journey. I'm too busy enjoying my own. Her response was immediate. That's how you know you've really healed, when their story becomes irrelevant to yours. She was right. Marcus had been a chapter in my life, an important one that taught me crucial lessons, but he wasn't the whole story. Not even close. That night, I updated my notebook. The dreams and goals section now had check marks next to several items. Enrolled in master's program, joined book club, started painting class, made new friends, went on a date with someone kind. Under it, I added new goals. Finish master's degree. Plan trip to Italy with Rachel and Mark. Submit photos to local gallery exhibition. Continue therapy and personal growth. Build healthy relationship with David or whoever comes next based on mutual respect. And at the very bottom, I wrote, never forget what you survived. Never forget what you're worth. Friday arrived and I dressed carefully for the faculty dinner. Not to impress anyone or live up to someone else's standards, but because I wanted to feel confident. I chose a burgundy dress that I loved, paired it with my grandmother's pearl earrings, different ones from those Marcus's mother had given me, and looked in the mirror with genuine appreciation for the woman staring back. David picked me up right on time, his face lighting up when I opened the door. Wow, he said simply. You look amazing. Thank you, I replied. You clean up pretty well yourself. The dinner was lovely. David's colleagues were warm and welcoming, drawing me into conversations about everything from literature to local politics to the best pizza in town. No one compared me to anyone else. No one made me feel like I needed to prove my worth. I was simply included, valued for being myself. Watching David interact with his students who were also at the dinner, I saw genuine kindness and respect. He remembered details about their lives, asked thoughtful questions, celebrated their achievements. This was who he was, not a performance. On the drive home, David asked, "Did you have a good time?" I really did, I said honestly. Your colleagues are great, and watching you with your students, you're really good at what you do. He smiled, a little shy. Thanks, that means a lot. He paused, then added, Emma, I really like you. I know we're taking things slow, and I respect that, but I wanted you to know that I'm serious about getting to know you better. No games, no comparisons, no hidden agendas, just honest interest in who you are. My throat tightened with emotion. David, that's exactly what I need to hear. And for the record, I really like you too. He walked me to my door, and when he kissed me goodnight, it was gentle and respectful, asking rather than taking. After he left, I stood in my doorway for a moment, marveling at how different this felt from anything with Marcus. This felt safe, chosen, real. The next morning, I woke to a text from my mother. Your father and I would love to have you over for Sunday dinner. No pressure, just family time. Let me know. I hadn't seen my parents much since the breakup. They'd liked Marcus, had been disappointed when we split, so they'd never pressed for details. But Rachel had filled them in on enough that they understood it had been necessary. I'll be there. I typed back. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, sweetie. We've missed you. Sunday dinner was easier than I expected. My father grilled chicken in the backyard while my mother and I made salad together in the kitchen, just like when I was growing up. They didn't ask about Marcus. They didn't push about David. They just enjoyed having me there, sharing a meal, being family. As we ate dessert, my father said something that surprised me. Emma, your mother and I have been talking. We realize we put a lot of pressure on you over the years to have a certain kind of life, the right partner, the right timeline, the right everything. We're sorry for that. We should have trusted you to know what's best for yourself. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you for saying that. We're proud of you, my mother added, for leaving when you needed to, for building a new life, for choosing yourself. That takes courage. We didn't teach you. You found it yourself. Maybe you did teach me, I said. You taught me to value honesty and self-respect. I just had to learn how to apply those lessons to my own life. We sat there together, three people who'd made mistakes and learned from them, who'd hurt each other unintentionally and forgiven, who were building something new based on acceptance rather than expectations. Later that evening, back in my apartment, I got an unexpected message. Sarah, Marcus's former coworker, asking if we could meet for coffee. I hesitated, then agreed. We'd spoken briefly after her promotion was announced, but hadn't seen each other in person since before everything happened. We met at a neutral cafe on Tuesday afternoon. Sarah arrived looking professional and confident, a far cry from the uncertain woman who'd called me months ago. Thank you for meeting me, she said as we sat down with our coffees. I know this might be weird, a little, I admitted, but I'm curious what you wanted to talk about. She took a deep breath. I wanted to thank you for telling the truth about Marcus. Even though it was hard, even though it cost you something personally, I didn't do it for you, I said honestly. I did it because I was asked, and I answered honestly. I know, she said, but the ripple effects have been significant. After Marcus left, the company did a full review of all their contracted consultants. They found multiple cases of expense fraud, unprofessional behavior, conflicts of interest, things that had been ignored or overlooked for years. Your honesty started a chain reaction of accountability. I hadn't known that. I'm glad something good came from it all. Also, Sarah continued, I learned something about myself. I'd been taught, like so many women are, to be flattered by male attention even when it made me uncomfortable, to ignore red flags because someone was charming or successful. But watching what happened to you, seeing how Marcus treated you and then blamed you, it woke me up. I've been more careful all about boundaries since then, more willing to trust my instincts. That's huge, I said sincerely. Good for you. We talked for another hour. Two women who'd been caught in the same man's manipulation, now supporting each other's growth. When we parted ways, I felt like I'd closed another circle. That night, I pulled out my notebook one last time. On a fresh page, I wrote a letter to my past self. Dear Emma from 6 months ago, standing in that restaurant, hearing words that shattered your world. I know you're hurting. I know you feel small and worthless and lost. But I need you to know something. You're about to become so much stronger than you ever imagined. You're going to walk out of that restaurant with your head high. You're going to pack your bags and leave. You're going to tell the truth even when it's scary. You're going to stand in a courtroom and demand the respect you deserve. And you're going to survive all of it. More than survive, you're going to thrive. You're going to go back to school, make new friends, discover hobbies you'd forgotten you loved. You're going to meet someone kind who treats you like you matter. You're going to rebuild relationships with your family. You're going to look in the mirror and like what you see. The pain you're feeling right now won't last forever, but the strength you're about to discover will. The lessons you're going to learn about your worth, about boundaries, about choosing yourself, those will stay with you forever. Marcus was wrong about you. You're not too old, not too plain, not enough in any way. You're perfect exactly as you are. And someday soon, you're going to believe that so deeply that no one will ever be able to make you doubt it again. Keep going. Keep choosing yourself. Keep believing that better things are coming. Because they are. I promise you, they are. With love and pride, Emma from 6 months in the future. I closed the notebook and set it aside, feeling the weight of the journey I'd traveled. From that humiliating dinner to this moment of peace, I'd crossed a distance that couldn't be measured in miles or time. I'd crossed it in growth, in healing, in choosing myself over and over again until it became natural. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Just wanted to say goodnight and that I'm already looking forward to seeing you this weekend. Sweet dreams, Emma. I smiled and typed back, sweet dreams to you too. And thank you for being exactly who you are. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd sat in that restaurant 6 months ago. Her eyes were clearer. Her smile was genuine. Her shoulders were unburdened by the weight of someone else's expectations. She was free. Truly, finally, completely free. And she was exactly enough, just as she was. Marcus had wanted someone younger, prettier, more like Sarah. He'd gotten his wish in a way. I was no longer trying to be what he wanted. I was becoming what I wanted. And that person was so much better than anything he could have appreciated. The betrayal had hurt. The humiliation had stung. But the liberation that followed had been worth every difficult moment. I'd lost a wedding, but gained myself. And that was a trade I'd make again in a heartbeat. As I drifted off to sleep that night, my last thought was simple and profound. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're really worth. And sometimes karma doesn't need your help. It just needs time. Marcus had his karma. He'd lost his career momentum, his reputation, and his chance at genuine connection because he'd been too blind to value what he had. Sarah had hers too, rising above the drama to find success and self-respect. And I had mine, building a life of authenticity and joy. The scales had balanced themselves as they always do. All I'd had to do was survive long enough to see it happen.